And we're good. So I got Addy ads today. So, hi everyone. I've got Addy ads today who I met through a cult priest this one time. He's a truther, citizen investigative journalist. And to be honest, he's always seems to be in the craziest place at the right time. Um, Now, I don't talk on this channel about politics. I don't do that because being an author and being what I do, especially in the truther community, if I were to tell you my views, it would alienate half of you, and I don't intend to do that. Never talked politics, never will. However, world events is not technically politics. I'm not talking about how we view what we're about to talk about. To be honest, I'm willing to learn from Addy because this is all new. But you guys have probably seen, if you're on Twitter or if you're on Facebook or anything, maybe not Facebook because they'd probably pull it down. But if you're on Twitter, you've seen these enormous protests in Brazil. Okay, they recently had an election. Okay, and there is controversy all over it, and the country is speaking out. Now, the media, the mainstream media, will not show you this. Okay, so everything that we're about to learn from Addy is boots on the ground shit that he has experienced. And Addy, just take it away, my friend. Let me know how you got involved in this and give everybody just a basic background, if you will, about what the deal is and how this whole thing began.
Okay. Yeah, will do, Micah. Thanks for having me on the show, man. I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
And if you want to write questions down and ask at the end or just interject, either way works. If you do have
Yeah.
questions. Yeah, so to go back up, it was really one of the craziest weeks ever for me. Someone very close to me died, and so I was back in Wisconsin, and for the funeral, and then the next day, my publisher at the National File says, "Do you want to go to Brazil?" And I said, "Are you joking?" He goes, "No," and I said, "Well, of course I want to go to Brazil." So the next day, I was in Brazil, less than 24 hours later, and we actually had planned to be there for like 2 weeks. I was supposed to come back tomorrow. At the earliest, if we didn't extend, but we actually had to leave after about 5 days, and I'll explain why in a bit here. But they're in their raining season right now / spring, so it's very wet, muddy. It's a quagmire almost every day. My first day there with my host, we actually took our shirts off and our shoes and our socks just to keep them dry, and go into the protest. We did have one nice day on Friday. Is beautiful, and we actually got some downtime too. That was our first period where we could actually just kind of relax and enjoy ourselves a bit. So that was nice. But we went
So if
there
you could
every day.
explain to people,
Yeah.
why your producer, you said your producer sent you to
Yes. I'm
Brazil.
sorry.
What is going on in Brazil? Let's start with that.
Sure. So my publisher at the
Your
National
publisher,
File,
sorry.
who hired me there, he sent me there. So I was working on behalf of the National File. I've been writing for them a little over a month now, just over a month. So I just started working with them. And what's going on in Brazil is they just had an election, and it's very contested. It's very similar to what we experienced in 2020. Actually, my publisher even said they are about to have their own version of January 6th. And we went there at pretty much at the right time. And the candidates, there were three main candidates. There was Bolsonaro, Jair Bolsonaro, who's the incumbent. He's more of a conservative-leaning populist. And the challenger, Ignacio Lula, who was a convicted felon at one point before he was released, and then Simone Tebet, Tebet, who got third, and she got about 2% of the vote, which is kind of similar to what you see in the U.S., with third party candidates. So those are the candidates. That was the context of what happened, and those results, I believe, were announced at the end of last month, so at the end of October. Mm-hmm. And the reason that the demonstrations happened, the protests and the manifestations, is because a large portion of the populace did not trust the election results, which stated that Lula won. And not only that,
Lula's the liberal one, right?
Yes, he's a self-described socialist, and he has ties to actual communists as well. Going back years ago, there's a woman called Bokova, I believe it's Irina. She's Bulgarian communist. And there's CCP and Taipei Institute connections as well, which people can read about on the National File. But that's the kind of the context for why we were there. But it wasn't just in support of Bolsonaro; it was for election transparency and against censorship. And again, this is not the United States. So there's actually a journalist I met. His name was Octavio Eustacio, and he was arrested 3 times and actually tortured while he was in custody, in an effort to get him to shut up. His arm was broken. He showed me an 8-inch scar on his arm, and he was actually put in a wheelchair. So he can't walk as a result of his torture. He tried fleeing, but was unable to. And some people actually have already fled Brazil. And he returned, and he's staying there and fighting. And we had a very hard time meeting anybody who spoke English for whatever reason, let alone an international journalist. I'm not saying anyone, I mean, they weren't there, but we didn't meet them. We didn't see any international journalists at all. So maybe that was just coincidence, or who knows. But so these protests in Brasilia, I want to add, we were in the capital, and they were at the national headquarters for the military, and the demonstrators actually have pretty strong.
Were you in Sao Paulo?
I wasn't. We probably would have been there, Micah, at some point if we were allowed to stay longer, but we weren't. And it's really the northeast corner of Brazil, which is the most corrupt and really the only part of the country that was in support of Lula, definitively. It's kind of has a history as a slave port, bringing lots of slaves through that area, which I found interesting as well. But yeah, we were in Brasilia. It's in the middle of the country. It was a city created with strategy in mind. Sao Paulo is very close to the border, and an easier target for invading armies. So there's actually a president who constructed the city and put it in the middle with that in mind. And because of that, it's a lot more spread out. It's not as confined as some of the other Brazilian cities. But demonstrators were at the national military headquarters there in Brazil. I couldn't tell you how many there were, thousands for sure. I didn't have a drone. That would have helped a lot to have a better idea, but there was many people, tens of thousands for sure, I think. And the number was growing as the week went on. So it seemed to be growing. They also told me, protesters did, they had no intent of leaving until demands were met. And kind of the hard deadline for that is the 1st of January, 2023, the first day of next year, when officially, according to the government of Brazil, that transfer of power is supposed to take place. So it's about 5 weeks until then, from the time we're speaking now. And as the week went on, we began to meet more and more people, and we finally connected with some people who spoke English. Actually, Octavio, that journalist who was persecuted, his producer spoke probably the best English that of any of the people that I met. So we had just started to make some good contacts when something happened on Friday night. And that was the week of the 14th, I believe. And that was, I was set to interview a local conservative campaign manager and then a lawyer. And I don't think they were in on the trap, Micah. They were kind of younger guys. They were older than me, but younger than the Americans who were also at the table. And I had a translator. His name was Renato Tibet. And I'll get to that.
Tibet, right?
And it went well. They just told me their concerns, what they think about what's going on in the country. Pretty standard interview. After the interview was over, they left. And I want to add too that I was late to the meeting because I was on Lee Stranahan's show, his radio show. So I was about an hour late, and my bodyguard, a British Texan, I call him Big Tex sometimes, he went there, and I get to the table and I sit down, and there's an FBI agent there, a woman, and then a man from the State Department whose name is Miguel Contreras. The woman, who is a blonde-ish woman in her early 50s, I would guess. Her name is Kristen Parkhouse. She gave us her phone number, her FBI email, her State Department email, and Miguel Contreras gave us his phone number and his State Department email and his business card. We looked them up, and they work for the government, the U.S. government, at the embassy there in Brasilia. So that was surprising, and I could tell that Contreras, he noticed I was a little bit nervous, and he bought me a drink. And after the younger guys, the politicos, they left, we did our interview. It went well. We just kind of hung out, and I was sitting next to Renato, the bar owner, and he tells me that he's cousins with Simone Tebet, the third place candidate. And my host also told me that Tebet is an uncommon last name in Brazil. So he also said that he stands to make a lot of money if Lula takes power, and that Bolsonaro is a fairer man to the populace at large, whereas Lula kind of is like a Mexican politician that he helps his buddies out and his friends and
So
the people.
to go back a little bit,
Yeah,
let's place some context to this. Okay, Bolsonaro was recently elected in spite, or his last election, he won the last election in spite of overwhelming push for the liberal candidate. Okay, it was a populist uprising, if I remember correctly, right?
yeah, he's a populist candidate, and it's kind of one of those parallels I see with honestly Donald Trump and Bolsonaro. So
in the sense that the candidate kind of came out of nowhere, gained huge support, and is being thrown out after one term, basically.
That's very accurate, Micah. Yes, yeah, thank you. Conversely, Lula and Biden are not quite as similar.
Okay.
Lula's not senile yet. So there's not really a whole lot of similarities between Biden and Lula.
Right.
But in the context of the election at large, there's a lot of parallels between our election and theirs, and also direct connections as well, not just parallels. Our CIA director right now, William Burns, he went to Brazil within the past year and told Bolsonaro not to mess with the electronic voting machines, which is one of the reasons that the people have been demonstrating. They want paper ballots, and they also want an audit of the election to be done by the military, which is their right. But the military was not given all of the information. So they basically said, we cannot say one way or another what happened because we don't have all the information.
Now, just let us all know real quick how we know how the election ended up with Biden with the 81 million votes and Trump with the 74 million votes and all that bullshit, right? Again, I'm not political one way or another, right? Or at least publicly I'm not. But what I would like to know is how close was the Brazil election?
Very close, very, very close. Even closer than 7 million. I want to say it was 2 to 3 million or 4. It was close enough that the percentage that Simone Tebet got possibly was a deciding factor. But yeah, it was even closer than ours.
In the sense that sort of libertarian candidates pull away from, they get their 2 to 3%, like your Shane Hazel or whatever. They get their 2 to 3%. And then the margin between the Democrat and the Republican is within that margin.
Right.
It's kind of the whole thing where you're mad at Ross Perot, or you're mad at the Libertarians or the Green Party because they pull away. But it's kind of like, what are you going to do? It's the same kind of scenario there, no?
Yeah, basically. And the other thing Renato told me is that his cousin, Simone, I can't remember the exact verbiage, but
right.
he basically, she became an ally of Lula, which was a huge mistake by Bolsonaro. He should have reeled her in right away if he could have, but Lula beat him to it. I don't know if Bolsonaro just didn't have that political shrewdness or acuity to do that, but that was a mistake. And again, that supports what Renato told me about him standing to make money if Lula takes power. Right. And it was at that time period in the conversation that the FBI chick jumped in and she said, you would make a good CIA agent. And I said, oh, okay.
To you?
Yeah.
That's called a soft pitch.
You already know, Micah. I love it. You're good, sir. Yeah, I didn't realize it at the time, but in hindsight, I was like, were they trying to recruit me?
Yeah. That would be,
So
you'd be an asset.
for sure, I would
Um,
go from target to asset, right?
that's right.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's put this into context for people. Okay, um, we went away from the liberals and went to the conservative Bolsonaro. What did Bolsonaro implement that the people are now fighting to keep in place versus what Lula, what's her name?
Lula.
Lula
Yeah, he's a
is,
male.
oh,
Male.
Lula is looking to do.
Yeah.
Okay. So what is Bolsonaro's his platform? What has he done to expand Brazil? Why are so many people invested in this?
Yeah, that's a good question. He and I'm not gonna say I'm the tell-all expert on this, but
Right.
one thing that Bolsonaro did do is he made it easier for Brazilians to arm themselves, and because of that, Brazil's crime rate has actually gone down. Brazil is one of the most violent countries in the world.
Yes.
There's this YouTube channel that analyzes violent interactions, and I would say at least 40% of the videos come out of Brazil. You know,
Right.
two dudes on a bike or whatever. And conversely, Brazilians also told me that Lula is going to try to disarm them if he takes power. And that may have been the straw that, broke the intelligence camel's back, so to speak, or that let the dam loose. Because the
Right.
only article I had time to post and get out after I met this English speaker, Vinny, and I'll send that to you really quick in case you wanna look at it.
Sure.
I was unaware that Brazilians could arm themselves, but they have more or less an army of 600,000 civilians. And Vinny told me that, excuse me, most of them are for the cause of more election transparency, less
So
censorship.
they're a righteous militia, basically.
Yeah, for sure. So I just send
Okay.
it to you. If you want to pull it up, you can, or share it out
Right.
to your followers. But the quote
Yeah.
was, "We are here to give our blood if necessary." Brazilian election protests have support of 600,000 member civilian army. And the video's there too. He speaks very good English. His name's Vinny. He was actually on Top Chef Brazil a while ago. He's a chef. Yeah, it's
Yes, I
pretty
saw that
impressive.
video with the chef. He speaks fantastic English. The guy with the
Yeah,
goatee. Yeah,
yeah,
he's
yeah, yeah. Very
fantastic. You
handsome
wanna
guy.
you wanna
Yeah.
talk about him for a minute? How you found him? Because out of nowhere, you got this video with this guy that speaks perfect English. Not only does he
Yeah.
speak perfect English, but he understands like cadence and language of America, and he speaks to us as if we're Americans talking about what he's defending. So, where did you meet this guy? And
Yeah.
I will definitely link his video because you sent it to me. But talk to me
Yes,
about
sir.
him real quick.
Yeah. We met him. He was hanging out kind of near Octavio's tent, the media tent. The persecuted journalist I mentioned earlier. There's a lot of people kind of congregating around there, and so I just I bumped into him. I was like, man, you speak good English, and I was like, what do you do? And we just got to talk, and I was like, do you want to do an interview? I could write up a story about you, and it turned out to be a really like a bit of a home run interview.
Right.
Really interesting guy. And again, he's part of this group called the CAC, which stands for collector, shooter, hunter, or in Portuguese, coleccionador, atirador, and caçador, or cacador.
Right.
Um,
Okay.
and basically, people who meet those compliances, going through the background checks and the psychological tests, they can buy firearms, which I didn't know. And again, Bolsonaro made it easier in some way for that group to allow more citizens to arm themselves because they really
And
had a
what this
huge.
does for people who are listening, what this does
Mhm.
by what he did, okay? I've made the argument, I guess it's a libertarian argument, but I've made the argument because we've seen this happen in Ecuador, where they legalized all the drugs and the deaths fell. The death rates alarmingly fell, okay? Because number one, you're taking the cartels out of it, so they're not mixing fentanyl and things into it, number one. Number two, okay, and this goes to the same thing with guns, it is now a regulated thing. Okay. So you got the background check, you do this, you do that. That's fine. But you're taking the cartels out of it. You're taking power out of the cartels. And what you're doing is you're arming the populace. Now, you were with an FBI agent and a intelligence agent as well. So I'm just going to ask you your opinion on this because I'm sure they had an opinion on it. Okay. But knowing the history of America, what do you think our intelligence agencies, how do I put this? what do you think their position behind the scenes on Sao Paulo is? Because we know that the U.S. loves to install dictators. We know that. Okay, so again, you met with them, so I'm not trying to put those specific people in a box, because they can have an unofficial position and an official
Yeah.
position. But where does it benefit our secret societies, our agencies, for the liberal to get in or for the conservative to stay in?
That's a great question, Micah. And I was just talking about that with Clint Russell earlier this morning,
Oh,
because
you were on
tradition,
Liberty?
yeah.
I love Clint. Okay, sorry, go
Yeah,
on.
he's great. Yeah, he's awesome. We historically, what the CIA has done in Spanish speaking Americas, Latin America, Central America, is topple socialist, communist, left leaning, properly elected people and installed, as you mentioned, right wing dictators. But here, it's almost the opposite. You have a right wing populist or conservative populist, Bolsonaro, and what seems to be the CIA and CCP trying to install Lula, who seems to be a left wing dictator. So
Mhm.
it's like I said, it's almost the opposite of what you've historically seen. And the question is why? Why is that
Yes,
happening?
that's my
Um,
question.
yeah,
So,
yeah.
any thoughts you have?
I don't know. I don't know, man. It might be that with this idea that these two wings are of the same bird. It doesn't really matter what the politics is. It matters who the people want, right?
Yeah. Well, it's
So,
the illusion of choice. It's
mhm.
the illusion of choice, right? We say you can go to Starbucks, you can go to Dunkin' Donuts and get 40 different flavors of whatever. But when it comes down to people who are ruling it, Jordan Maxwell talked about this, my hero and mentor. He talked about this. He says people are selected. I mean, no, people are not selected. They're elected. Okay? That's basically the case. What does Brazil bring to the table nationally as far as food and produce that this
Yeah.
could possibly affect us?
They are huge exporters of lots of food, particularly beef and soy.
Okay.
And they are kind of attached at the hip with the Chinese because the Chinese is one of their biggest clients.
Mm-hmm.
And strategically speaking, China is not worried about an invading army. Nobody wants to invade China.
No.
What they're worried about is feeding their people, of which they have over 1 billion. So they are kind of codependent on each other, the Brazilians
Right.
and the Chinese. So that's a huge influence in this. And as I mentioned, I may not have mentioned, a lot of our beef, a lot of American beef, believe it or not, comes from Brazil. It doesn't come from our own country. So
Right.
Brazil's a really, and Vinny talks about this too. It's really important strategically with regards to food, but not just that. It's also in terms of black market, a good kind of middleman to getting drugs to Europe, particularly the port of Antwerp from
Right.
Mexico.
Right.
So
Okay. That makes sense. So, what other types of food would you say, like pears, apples? What kind of like produce and stuff do they
yeah,
look at?
I'm gonna admit I don't know what else. I
Okay.
actually was kind of a novice up until like 2 weeks ago in Brazil, Micah. So
Mhm.
yeah, I'm gonna pass on that. But I just know, generally speaking, Vinny the chef told me that uh, food in general, they're big exporters of those types of
Okay.
resources. And I know soy as well, which, as you know, soy is in like everything
Yeah.
nowadays.
It's awful.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
awful. So is there anything that you saw there that you haven't talked about on you're making your rounds right now on all the shows, and I appreciate you reaching out to me.
Yeah.
But I would like to know, is there anything that you saw there you can tell us that is not being reported on there? Like the difference between for the very tiny bit that's actually making the news, okay, which is like nothing. Which is why I wanted to have you on because it's important to know that you've got to get away from the mainstream news, and that's why people like you are so vital because you'll go trenches. Um, have you seen anything there that is out of the ordinary or anything that surprised you that you want to share with people here?
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, I might have mentioned this already, but I was really kind of shocked we couldn't find any other international journalists, and I mean nobody, as far
Right.
as I could tell.
Now, do these
And
people, do these, you have experience with this, but when you're talking journalists, right, do you usually see the typical catty cornered thing, the press badge? Do they always wear that, or do they kind of blend in?
yeah, they generally are pretty easy to identify, Micah, whether it's a press pass or the boom mic with the mop
Yeah,
on it,
I know what the
big
boom is. Yeah,
camera,
yeah,
or
yeah.
even a gimbal for independent people. Yeah, they're usually, or they maybe they wear the T-shirt with their whatever outlet they're representing. Yeah, usually pretty easy to identify. But and we walked around and we walked around. We went there every single day. Um, couldn't find anybody. Yes, so that was pretty shocking to me. I thought we would bump into at least one or two people.
Right.
Um,
Now, did you go to Brazil with a game, or were you just kind of like, I'll go to Brazil, I'll wing it, let's see what we can find?
yeah, I went there because the National File asked me to, my
Right.
publisher.
Right.
Um, and I went there and I met up with. I didn't know my British Texan my bodyguard, Big Tex. I didn't know him prior, but we had a really good, I think, work experience. And I told him, I was like, man, I'm sad we have to part ways so soon. I was looking forward to spending more time with you because he was really fun to spend time with. And we both kind of got blindsided a little bit by the intelligence trap, but I think we adapted pretty quickly to it. So
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. Were you warned not to show certain things by anyone? Were you like intimidated at all?
I'll continue my story. So
Yeah, there you go.
um so after Renato told, she said, the soft pitch, right? You would make a good
Right.
CIA agent. And then
Mm-hmm.
Miguel Contreras, the State Department guy, he wanted to go to this other bar called Jungle Bar, also owned by Renato Tibet. Much younger crowd, louder,
Now
kind of
there's
more.
two Tibets. There's two Tibets you're talking about. Do me a favor, just name them both and who they are.
Yep. So Renato, male, 33, and I'll send you. Actually, here I'll bring this. I'll send the video in the private chat, and
Okay.
if you want to just play it while I'm talking, you can mute it because there's some music. So I don't know
Right.
if you're
You know
worried
what I'll
about.
do is I'll put it in the links afterwards. But
Okay.
basically,
Okay.
I just
Yeah.
wanted you. So you have Renato. What does he do, and who is the other Tibet?
He's the bar owner who basically facilitated the meeting with the campaign manager, the lawyer, and the fact that the State Department employee and the FBI woman were there. That was all because of Renato, the bar owner. So the first bar we were at, owned by Renato, Dobie, like Kobe with a D, bit older crowd, quieter, calmer conversations. The Jungle Bar was more of a younger crowd, louder. Music was louder, kind of hard to hear. So we relented and we go in Miguel Contreras' car, which has diplomatic plates. And as we're traveling there, he kind of brags to us that we can't be touched because we have diplomatic plates. And we get there and we're not there but 5 minutes when a young redhead sent over a napkin to my bodyguard that said, I think you're handsome. Here's my number in case you want to talk. And he said no at first, and it took about 20 to 25 minutes of persuasion from at least two other people to get him to finally relent and go over and just have a chat with her. She tried kissing him for most of the night. She also tried bringing him home to for whatever reason.
Well, that's a standard top. That's a standard thing that the agencies do. Okay, what they'll do is when you become a whistleblower, or when you're public and you're speaking out against certain things, what they'll do is they'll try and charm you with sexual acts. What they'll do is they'll find and people will know this too. People will know this too because one of the people who I listened to, I don't know if you know who Karen Hughes is. She was in the World Bank.
Okay.
She's a
Okay.
lawyer in DC. Very brilliant woman. She exposed the IMF. Okay, she exposed all that stuff. But what they do is they send in people who are like way too good looking for you to basically sexually molest you. And a lot of these politicians and a lot of these people give into it. Okay, you can think of Eric Swalwell and the Chinese Spy, for example. That's basically what they do. Is they get you in by controlling your urges and sending someone out there with like big tits and just who's way too good looking. That's how they get you in. That's what they do.
Yeah,
These are assets. This is
for
what they
sure.
use them for.
For sure. And I was probably lucky because my bodyguard is, excuse me, he's tall and handsome, and he's not unfamiliar with talking to pretty women.
I'm sure, yeah.
If he had not been, he probably would have been seduced.
Yes,
So I
that's
was
what they
kind of
do. They
lucky.
count on it because politics is not a very pretty game. Literally, it's not a pretty person's game. Okay, that's not what it
Yeah.
is.
So I was lucky my bodyguard was handsome and he was
Yeah.
not easily seduced. He also had has a girlfriend, and he was loyal to her. He didn't misbehave. So
But that's what they do. These assets, they try and flirt with you. They do everything for it. And some people just can't handle it because they haven't had sex in so long. And what they do is they catch you on the pillow talk. That's what they do. And then they report back.
Yep.
This is 100% what they do. And there's also sometimes, they'll get you naked. And then when you fall asleep, they'll like plant a bug on your clothes. They'll do all sorts of stuff. It's insane. Let me ask you a question real quick. How much of a distraction is Brazil in the World Cup right now versus this? Like, is the country focusing the news and everything on Brazil in the World Cup and kind of veering people away from looking at this? Did you notice that? Or when you were in Brazil, had it even started?
That's a great question, Micah. It started when I was in the airport at my connection when we were fleeing. So I can say that it's probably being used as a distraction. The mainstream media in Brazil basically didn't mention these people demonstrating at all. A number that is at least 6 figures across the country.
Right.
So
I mean,
I'm
you see video, you see aerial shots of 100,000 people.
Yeah.
100,000 people.
It's amazing.
Imagine for a second you fill up a concert at Central Park. That's going on all over the country.
Yeah, yeah. And their biggest media outlet is called Globo, Globo. And they had just like a little blurb about it, like the week we were there, like at the bottom of the page. And it was like, they're doing the same thing that our media does when stuff like this happens and they don't want to cover it. They basically just try to ignore it. And that was something that Octavio also, he was doing the public intel citizen journal thing. He quit mainstream media and he was getting a bigger voice than the entire Brazilian media by himself.
They don't like
that. That's why they arrested him and tortured him.
They don't like that.
For sure, bro. For sure. And that's happening all over the world. This open source public intel model. It's really being a monkey, or it's acting as a monkey wrench for the elites and their traditional vice-like grip control of the media.
Right. So we're about 34 minutes in. We said 40, 45. So let's fast forward to what really piqued my interest with you, which is basically going out. So if you could just tell us anything you can about that, whatever you feel comfortable sharing.
About I'm sorry, you cut out for a second. About what exactly?
Oh, I'm sorry. Can you hear me?
Yeah, now I can, but I just missed the one word you wanted me to speak on. What did you want me to speak on?
No, I said you guys basically got chased out. Like, you had to cut early and you had to bounce. So if you could just go into that, because that's what really interested me about your story.
For sure, Micah. Okay, so after my bodyguard finally gets up, he relents. He's like, okay, I'll talk to her. Not 5 minutes later, almost immediately, 2 young brunettes came over and sat next to me. And the cuter one told me her name was Bianca, which we later found out was a lie because she's actually the girlfriend of Renato Tibet. And so her name is Natalie Ribeiro. I went to the bathroom. I came back and Renato's sitting in my seat. So I think he got a little jealous, or she was enjoying her job too much. Whatever. I go and sit next to her, and then the asset comes, the main asset. Let's call him the beard. And people can see him on the video that
the word again, you cut out. What's the word again?
The beard. He had a big beard, and that's something that Major Prather talks about too. Is like, what do intelligence contractors and the Taliban have in common? A big beard, right? So they use that to build rapport with the Taliban. And
incidentally, Bianca is what you call, they're called honey.
oh, wow.
That's the
That's
name
very
for them. They're called honeypots because it's a sweet trap.
yes,
It's the
yeah, that's
idea
correct.
that you have the honey, but you stick your hand in like poo, and they're bees. You know,
Winnie
they're
Pooh,
very dangerous. So they're called honeypots.
yeah, Winnie the Pooh, yeah. So he sits over and he starts talking to Renato for a couple minutes. I don't say anything, I just listen. Appeared to speak French fluently. He also appeared to have an accent. After a couple minutes, Renato gets up, and it's just me and the beard now. He's sitting right across from me, and he says, "What are you doing here?" I said, "Oh, I'm covering the protests, demonstrations. I'm a journalist." And there's a beat, and he says, "What are you doing here?" And I thought, "Oh my gosh, I know what's going on right now." And then he said, "We're watching every ping, every text message, every article you put out. We're reading them all." He made it clear we should leave, and he kept wanting me to go for a walk with him. He said, "Let's go for a walk." I said, "I'm not going for a walk with you." And then he also kept trying to buy me drinks, drinks that weren't poisoned. I know that because he was like, "See, it's fine." He drank it, and then he gave it to me. He wanted to get me drunk to, I think, eat more easily
Well,
influence me.
Addy, do you know what they do now?
What's that?
Do you know what they do now? How they get you? Usually they put drugs that knock you out, like roofies, in there, and they build their tolerance up to it. But what they do now is they'll get you a nice cold mixed drink, right? And they'll take a sip and think everything is okay. And then they'll wait a few minutes. And in Brazil, it's boiling hot. And then the ice melts. But in the ice was the poison. So they'll drink it and they'll be fine because it's still in the ice. They'll give it to you melted. You'll drink it. Boom.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Wow. Well, I'm glad I didn't drink it.
Yeah.
And we started to talk in circles after a bit. And I go and tell my bodyguard, I was like, "Okay, it's time to let him know." I whisper in his ear after I walk across the room. I was like, "Hey, man, I think we walked into a trap. The girl you're talking to is with that guy over there, and I think he works for the CIA." And he's like, "Are you serious?" And I said, "Yes, I'm serious." And we kind of did a counter espionage trap. I went over, started talking to him again, and then my bodyguard, after a couple minutes, recorded him, walked over to him, and he later told me I would wind up in a black site in the middle of the ocean. He also told me one of us is armed and it's not you. The former I got on camera, the latter I didn't. He also told me he used to work in Iraq and Afghanistan. I got that on camera as well. And he, at one point, I recorded him and I said, "You know her, don't you?" And I was referring to the FBI chick. Her name was Kristen Parkhouse. She gave us her State Department email, her FBI email, her phone number. Right. And then after a bit, I'm like, "Okay, it's time to go." And I was about to call the Uber, and I'm like, "Oh wait, my backpack is still in Miguel Contreras' car." And I asked him very politely if I could go get it. And that's when he like flipped on a dime and he started verbally abusing me. He then started like pushing me. And after like the third or fourth time, my bodyguard just like put him on the ground. Renato came over and like pushed him back. And I held Miguel Contreras down. And if they weren't armed, we could have easily tuned these guys up. But he told us he was armed, and I didn't want to test that. And I'm glad I didn't let my anger take control of me. And finally, he says after this, "Okay, I'll get you your backpack." We walk over. It's about 10 yards away, not that far. He unlocks the car, gives me my backpack, and I searched it several times for bugs, by the way, after. And then he says, "If I ever see you again, I'm going to kill you." And when the dust settled from the fight, all the assets were gone. The beard and all the ladies were gone. And it was just Renato and Contreras. And I got Contreras on camera trying to smack the phone out of my hand.
Well, Addy, they don't really always use bugs anymore. I don't know if I wrote about this in one of my books. What they do is it's a spray now, and they're microchips. What happens is they spray it onto your clothes, and like 20 microchips land on it, and they're trackers. They can track. So you wouldn't even know if it was a bug or not. You could spray it on your shirt. You could spray it. That's what they use now.
Yeah, I think it's called smart dust. If I'm
smart
not
dust, exactly. That's
yeah.
what it is. Yeah, they bake it into food, You know, they'll have like a banquet or something, and they'll have all these important people in there. They'll eat a cookie, and the smart dust is in the cookie, and it's in your body for X amount of hours till you shit it out.
Sure.
Yeah.
Wow, fascinating stuff. So, yeah, after that, I was like, let's dip. I called the Uber. We slipped out the back. And
do you think you triggered him? Do you think you triggered him with something?
For sure, dude. I think we made him look stupid. We made the CIA look stupid because I think they underestimated us, and they lost control. And we got it on camera. And after this, we got counsel from former intelligence operatives and journalists who have experience getting intimidated in a similar way. And they basically told us the same thing. They said, you guys should leave as soon as possible. We were fortunate. We had an armed escort take us to where we needed to go. And we left and we went our separate ways. And yeah, that's basically what happened. And
when you landed in the States, did anyone meet you? Were you debriefed?
I wasn't. Fortunately, I wasn't. It was just my friend at the airport. So that was actually my next biggest fear. I was like, they're going to pick me up when I get there. That was my fear. And I overslept because I was on Emerald's show, and people were freaking out for like 20 minutes. And I was like, oh gosh, I overslept. But
you know what they do, Addy, you know what they do now? The most cutting edge science that they do one of two things. Number one, they hook you up to a machine, right? They measure all your vitals, and they inject you with something that stimulates your spinal cord or your nervous system. And what it does is they monitor your heart rate and your whole vitals are fine and normal, but it gives you an excruciating headache, like a migraine times 10 level headache. The other thing that they do is if they were going to torture you, what they have now is they have a drug, okay, that when they inject you with it, it makes 1 hour feel like a week. So imagine that mental torture, okay? Because in the military now, they don't have time to just play Metallica out the window and at an embassy, or play "We're Not Gonna Take It" by Twisted Sister for like 12 hours. They'll inject you with this, and after 30 minutes, you're gonna go bananas.
Yeah. Wow, I did not know that. Yeah, well, fortunately, I got out, disembarked and got out quickly. And the person who picked me up from the airport said, I can still smell the jungle on you, because I don't know. So, yeah, it's funny. My toenails, they like started to turn red because the dirt is like, it's almost like a blood red.
Right.
Yeah. Kind of
all the iron. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's what happened, man. And like I said, I have like 3 or 4 articles that I've been sitting on just because I've had Thanksgiving and family stuff. But now that that's all out of the way, and I can get the stuff out there. So I'll send
Addy, to be honest with you, man, like we talked about off camera, I remember at one point you're like, I shouldn't do this anymore. And I said, I don't know many people like you. You know, I'm fortunate enough to know you, and you're very good at what you do. You're very good at what you do, and I'm glad you came back to citizen journalism. I want you to tell everybody where both they can find you, and if they're interested in reading these articles or seeing these videos. Do you have like a link tree? Do you have something that you can share?
Yeah, definitely. And I appreciate that, Mike. I remember you telling me that. I think it was in the spring. So
yeah,
I'm on Twitter. I post everything pretty much to my Twitter. One Addy Ads, one spelled out ONEADDYADDS. I'm also on Telegram at the same. And for my videos, I'm on Rockfin and Rumble primarily. I also have a YouTube, but I direct people to Rockfin and Rumble. And for the my outlet that the outlet that I am working for, the National File, is at nationalfile.com. I tweet those out too. So, those articles will be out there. I met a tribal chief, indigenous tribal chief, and he endorsed Jesus Christ and Donald Trump. So that's going to be an article that I'm going to put out. I got some writing cut out for me today. I think this is my last interview, although I'm doing a show, I think later at like 4 or 5. So, and then if people want to buy me a coffee, I still need it and I still appreciate it. Buymeacoffee.com/Addy Ads. I actually got kicked off Linktree, so I'll tweet out that, and I'm also on Facebook too for the older
right. keep an eye out for. I'm going to post this video immediately.
Oh, nice. I'll share it out.
Check every once in a while. Reply to people's comments. Because there's people that are going to be very interested in this.
Definitely.
So,
thanks for having me on, Mike. I really appreciate it.
You had killer interview. And one more question for you. With the whole Elon Musk thing, okay? Did you ever have a Twitter that was banned and you're using a different one right now that you're waiting for the original one to come back? Because I know you've been banned from a ton of platforms.
Yeah, I had the Twitter I made in the 7th grade got banned about a month or 2 ago. But funnily enough, I didn't. I made the Twitter I'm using now. I had 2 going at the same time, so I did lose one of them. But and I would like to get it back, but it's a much smaller one, so it's mostly for like sentimental purposes.
All right, Addy, to be honest with you, man, if this is the kind of stuff you're doing, I'd like you to come on more often. I know that you're not going to have a mind-blowing story every time, but my last question for you is, what is next for you?
Yeah, that's a good question. I can answer it. I'm actually going to be more than likely heading down to Georgia again for the Senate duel between Walker and Warnock.
You're doing the runoff?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
So,
and yeah, if there's anything that you ever want to get out on a platform or anything, if there's anything that you want to just share about something or some stuff that's not really being exposed or anything, you're always welcome back on.
Thank you, Mike. I appreciate it. How many people can say their first bar fight was with the CIA?
There you go. That's amazing. Yeah. That's basically what it is, right? A guy that looks like Surge from System of a Down sits down with you and then threatens your life and tells you he's armed, right? That's basically what happened.
Yeah, it is. It's pretty nuts. But
just watch out for those honeypots, man. Honestly.
Yes, sir.
Like, you're a good looking dude, but know your limits, okay? Sometimes 10s and 12s come after you and you're like, something's up.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, you're right. Yeah. I know how to spot, things that are out of pattern, I think. So yeah.
Are you in touch with your bodyguards though?
Yeah, we're still cool. Yeah, he's a very brave man, and I'm hoping we can hang out again because it's really cool to, I don't know, it's like one of those like bonding experiences, right? Traumatic bonding.
Of course. All right, Addy, thank you for your time, my friend.
Thanks, Micah. Have a great day, sir. And as soon as you share it out, I'll put it on my channels.
Yeah.